Good evening, dear listeners. I am your host at Haunted Lullabies, the channel dedicated to bringing you the spookiest tales that will keep you up at night. Here we delve into the mysterious, the unexplained, the eerie, and the downright terrifying. We take you on a journey through the shadows, exploring chilling accounts that will set your imagination alight. Our stories are not for the faint-hearted. They are for those who like to flirt with fear, and for those who find a strange comfort in the goosebumps that our tales provide. We invite you to immerse yourself in the world of the supernatural, the paranormal, and the downright creepy. Tonight, I have 5 true, terrifying tales for you all. So brace yourselves and join me as we venture into the depths of the unknown, where the only constant is fear itself. A few years back, I decided to take a solo hiking trip into a remote area known as the Whispering Woods. As a nature enthusiast, the untamed allure of this ancient forest was too enticing to resist. A multi-day expedition was planned, my backpack filled to the brim with everything I'd need. The thrill of adventure was palpable as I laced up my hiking boots and watched the sun rise, casting dappled shadows over the dense forest that lay ahead. The Whispering Woods were named for an eerie phenomenon. The trees were so tightly packed that the wind created a soft rustling whisper as it danced through the leaves. It was a symphony of nature, a sound that I found both enchanting and mysterious. This was a place where time seemed to stand still, a place that held secrets in its shadows, and I was eager to uncover them. As the day wore on, I ventured deeper into the heart of the forest. My footsteps crunched on the leaf-strewn path, the only sound to break the profound silence. I marveled at the towering trees, their gnarled branches reaching skyward as if trying to brush the clouds. I made camp, as twilight painted the sky with hues of pink and purple, the forest coming alive with nocturnal sounds. Little did I know, the Whispering Woods had more than just natural beauty to offer. As night fell, I prepared for a peaceful sleep under the stars, oblivious to the terrifying truth that would soon unveil itself in the darkest corners of the woods. On the second night of my journey, as I lay in my tent, a soft, almost inaudible whisper began to seep into my consciousness. I found myself straining to hear it, this strange sound that seemed to be carried on the wind itself. It was a whisper, a gentle murmur, like a secret being shared by the very trees around me. At first, I dismissed it as a figment of my imagination. After all, I was in the Whispering Woods, a place known for the eerie sounds that the wind created as it rustled through the tightly packed trees. It was easy to imagine that the wind was whispering secrets, spinning tales of the forest's ancient past. But as the night deepened, the whispering persisted. It was no longer a gentle murmur, but a persistent hum, growing louder and more insistent with each passing minute. It seemed to come from all directions, so intimately close, yet impossibly distant, like a chorus of voices speaking in unison. I felt a chill creep up my spine as the realization hit me. This was not my imagination playing tricks on me. This was real. This was something else entirely. Something was whispering in the night, and I was miles away from civilization, alone in my little tent in the middle of the Whispering Woods. I tried to shake off the growing sense of unease. I told myself it was just the wind, just the trees. But the whispering didn't stop. It continued, relentless and unyielding, a constant companion in the dark stillness of the night. The whispers became a cacophony, an orchestra of sounds that seemed to reverberate in my very soul. It was as though the forest itself was alive, its ancient heart beating in rhythm with the whispers that filled the air. The whispers persisted, growing louder and more persistent with each passing minute. I knew then that this was not a simple trick of the wind. This was something more, something that defied explanation. The Whispering Woods were living up to their name, and I was right in the heart of it all. I was miles away from civilization, deep into the heart of the Whispering Woods. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They seemed to be calling me, beckoning me. I knew I had to face whatever was out there. With my heart pounding like a drum, I mustered the courage to unzip my tent. The cold night air rushed in, sending a shiver down my spine. As I stepped out, the moonlight illuminated the dense forest around me. The whispering seemed to come from every direction, swirling around me like a spectral chorus. My breath hitched in my throat as I ventured further from the safety of my tent. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow dart between the trees, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Then, Just as my fear was reaching a crescendo, the whispers stopped. An eerie silence filled the forest. It felt as though the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something. And then, it happened. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall, cloaked in shadow, and it seemed to float above the ground. It was the source of the whispers. I was frozen in place, my blood turning to ice in my veins. The figure approached me, its whispers growing louder, more coherent. It spoke in a language I couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a plea, a desperate cry for help. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the figure, but eventually the sun began to rise. As the first light of dawn touched the figure, it vanished, leaving nothing but the echoes of its whispers in my mind. I'll never forget what I discovered in those woods, and it still gives me nightmares to this day. So there I was, off on an adventure, filled with excitement and a bit of trepidation. The journey was long and arduous, as I ventured deeper into the remote, mountainous region. The landscape was breathtaking, but the further I traveled, the more isolated I felt. The anticipation of discovering something new was palpable, yet a strange unease started to creep in. It was an uncanny silence that hung in the air, a silence that you could almost touch. The once lively chatter of wildlife had faded into nothingness, replaced by a deafening quiet that seemed to echo the emptiness of the surroundings. As I approached the town, the sense of isolation intensified. The place that was supposed to be a hidden gem was looking more like a forgotten relic of the past. Little did I know, the adventure I was so eager for was about to turn into my worst nightmare. As I stepped into the town, it was like walking into a different world, a world forgotten by time itself, abandoned by its inhabitants, and seemingly erased from all maps. The once bustling streets were now silent, with not a soul in sight. The houses, once filled with life and laughter, were now empty shells, their windows staring out like vacant eyes. The air was heavy with an eerie sense of abandonment. Each footfall echoed in the empty streets, bouncing off the walls of the deserted buildings. The only sound was the hollow whistle of the wind, weaving its way through the narrow alleyways, carrying with it the whispers of a time long gone. The town, nestled deep in the mountains, was isolated from the rest of the world. It was as if the mountains themselves were trying to keep a secret of a town that had simply vanished. But it wasn't just the isolation that was unsettling. It was the profound silence. A silence that seemed to envelop the entire town, amplifying the sense of desolation. As I moved deeper into the heart of the town, the feeling of unease grew stronger. There was something ominous about the abandoned houses, the boarded-up shops, and the empty town square. The town was like a puzzle, each piece more puzzling than the last. The silence was broken only by the occasional creak of a rusty gate or the distant hoot of an owl. The chilling silence seemed to feed off the isolation, creating an overwhelming sense of unease that lingered in the air like a thick fog. I was alone in this desolate ghost town, surrounded by abandoned structures that were once brimming with life. The sense of isolation was almost palpable, like a weight pressing down on me. But as I continued to explore, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling. A feeling that, despite the apparent abandonment, I wasn't entirely alone. A feeling that there was something or someone watching from the shadows. I was alone, or so I thought. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I saw it. A silhouette, standing at the far end of a narrow alley, its form barely discernible against the backdrop of decaying buildings. Its presence was as silent as the town itself, a stark contrast to the pounding of my heart, which echoed in my ears like a drum. There was something profoundly unsettling about the figure. It was as though the very air around it was charged with an unseen energy, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I called out to it, my voice echoing in the otherwise silent town, but there was no response. Only my own voice bouncing back at me, amplifying the loneliness of this deserted place. As I moved closer, the figure turned slowly, its movements unnaturally smooth, and then, in a blink, it was gone, vanished, as though it had never been there at all. The alley was once again empty, the only trace of its presence, the chilling sense of dread that had settled over me. I stood there, my mind racing. Was it a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination, perhaps? But no, it felt too real, too tangible. I could still feel the cold fear that had clenched my stomach when I saw it. The panic set in then, a creeping, gnawing fear that made my blood run cold. The realization hit me like a cold gust of wind. This town wasn't just abandoned, it was haunted. Haunted by something, or someone, I couldn't explain. The silence wasn't just silence. It was a void left by the absence of life, filled only by the echoes of a past long gone. I stood there, frozen in fear, unable to comprehend what I just witnessed. This wasn't just a ghost town. It was a town of shadows, a town that had seemingly vanished from existence. And I, a lone explorer, had stumbled upon its eerie secret. The reality, or rather the unreality of the situation, hit me like a ton of bricks. It was as if I had stumbled into a nightmarish realm, a place that had been wiped off the face of the earth. The deserted streets, the silent houses, the eerie stillness. It all seemed to scream at me that this town, this place, didn't exist. At least not anymore. Was I trapped in a phantom town? A ghost of a place that had once thrived? The terrifying thought made my heart race, my palms sweat. All I could think of was to leave, to get out of this place that seemed to defy all logic and reason. I ran, my footsteps echoing in the haunting silence, each thump a desperate plea for escape. The town seemed to stretch on forever, its deserted lanes spiraling into infinity, a cruel labyrinth with no exit in sight. As I dashed through the maze of abandoned buildings, the shadowy figure seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was a spectre, a phantom, a figment of the town's forgotten past. I could feel its eyes on me, cold and unwavering, as if it were watching, waiting, biding its time. But why? What did it want from me? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it, the road that led back to civilization, back to reality. With a sigh of relief that echoed through the desolate town, I stepped onto the familiar gravel, the tangible proof of my escape. Back in the safety of civilization, I tried to make sense of what had happened, yet no explanation seemed to fit. The town, the shadowy figure, it was all an enigma, a chilling puzzle with no solution. That town, that shadowy figure, they remain a mystery, a chilling reminder of the unknown. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that desolate town, but I can tell you it's a place I'll never forget. My name is Lisa, and I've always had a fascination with history. This intrigue led me to Crescent Manor, an aging yet stunning apartment brimming with stories from bygone eras. Every corner of the manor was a testament to the past, each piece of antique furniture a silent storyteller, whispering tales of the former residents who'd once graced these rooms. The thrill of living amidst such history was exhilarating. The ornate carvings, the centuries-old paintings, the vintage relics, they all held an irresistible charm. The manor was a time capsule, a gateway that transported me back to the Victorian era, and I was deeply drawn to its timeless allure. But beneath this enchanting facade, the manor held secrets that were as old as the manor itself. Little did I know my fascination with the past would soon turn into a horrifying experience. My first few days at Crescent Manor were peaceful, until the strange occurrences began. The manor was filled with relics from a bygone era, each piece echoing stories of the past. However, the tranquility was soon replaced by an eerie sense of unease. The first sign was a sense of displacement. Items I had carefully placed would mysteriously move. A cup of tea I left on the table would be on a different shelf when I returned. My favorite book would vanish from my bedside only to reappear on the dusty mantelpiece. Then, there were the noises, strange, unaccountable sounds that would startle me out of my daydreams. A soft whispering in the stillness of the night, the faint rustle of fabric like a dress brushing against the floor, the creaking of antique furniture when no one was near. And then there was the feeling of being watched, that prickly sensation, like eyes boring into the back of your head. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew stronger with each passing day. I would often find myself looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone, but there would be nothing. Just the silence and the shadows. I tried to ignore these signs, brushing them off as quirks of an old building. Little did I know these were not mere quirks, but the beginning of a chilling tale that would forever haunt my memories. But as the days turned into weeks, the disturbances became impossible to ignore. I first noticed it late one night when I was reading in the drawing room. I heard a whisper, a soft whimpering sound like a woman crying. I brushed it off as the wind or perhaps the old manor settling, but it persisted, growing louder and more desperate. By the second week, the whispering had evolved into hushed conversations, disjointed words and phrases that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was as if the manor was trying to communicate, its spectral inhabitants trapped within its aged confines. The ghostly figures began to appear soon after. At first, they were fleeting images in the corner of my eye, but they quickly became more tangible. A woman in a Victorian-era gown, her face obscured by a veil, would often appear in the hallway, disappearing as soon as I tried to approach her. At night, I would often wake up to the sound of footsteps echoing through the manor. They were slow, deliberate, and heavy, as if someone was pacing the hallways. I would lie awake, holding my breath, as the footsteps would stop outside my bedroom door, waiting for something that never came. Then, there were the cold spots, unexplainable, chilling areas in the manor where the temperature would suddenly drop. It was in these spots that the apparitions were most frequent, their spectral forms shimmering in the icy air. The haunting reached a crescendo when I found myself face to face with the weeping spirit. Her eyes met mine, and a bone-chilling scream echoed through the manor. The sound was otherworldly, a cry of pain and sorrow that resonated within my very soul. I was terrified, but my curiosity pushed me to uncover the truth. I knew then that I was dealing with something beyond my comprehension, a haunting that was deeply rooted in the history of Crescent Manor. I was living in a house of ghosts, each with their own story to tell, and I was determined to listen. One night I was awoken by the sound of a woman's sobs echoing through the manor. The cry was heart-wrenching, a symphony of sorrow that seemed to seep into the very walls of Crescent Manor. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, and I decided to investigate. The house was deathly quiet, save for the weeping that seemed to grow louder with each step I took. The air was thick with a sense of dread, a palpable tension that seemed to whisper tales of long-forgotten tragedy. Suddenly, there she was. A spectral figure, dressed in what appeared to be Victorian-era clothing, her face obscured by a veil of tears. Her sobs were now a quiet whimper, and as she looked up, I saw the depth of her anguish reflected in her ghostly eyes. Our gazes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, a scream. A bone-chilling, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the manor, rattling the antique fixtures and shaking me to my core. I could feel the icy grip of fear clutching at my heart as the reality of my situation sunk in. This wasn't just a charming old apartment filled with historic relics. This was a dwelling of despair, a monument to a sorrow that had transcended the boundaries of life and death. In that moment, I knew I was living in a nightmare. That encounter marked the end of my stay at Crescent Manor. The very next morning, with the sun's rays providing a fleeting sense of security, I packed my belongings and left the manor, leaving behind the echoes of a past that refused to rest. The chilling gaze of the spectral woman, her mournful cry, it was all too real, too terrifying. I moved to a modern flat, devoid of any historic charm, and yet I found comfort in its mundane simplicity. But the Crescent Manor, its antique charm, its haunting history, it left an indelible mark on me. I no longer viewed history with the same romantic fascination. It had taken on a more eerie, sinister hue, and so the haunting of Crescent Manor became a part of my own history, a chilling chapter I'd recount with a shudder. To this day, the haunting of Crescent Manor is an experience I'll never forget, a chilling reminder of the past that still lingers in the present. One afternoon, I found myself standing before the gates of an abandoned asylum, a monument to human despair and forgotten lives. This once bustling institution, now a decaying relic, was shrouded in an eerie silence, its imposing structure a stark contrast to the serene countryside around it. It was a place where time seemed to have stood still, a monument to a bygone era of medicine and mental health. The asylum bore the scars of its past, the peeling paint and crumbling bricks a testament to years of neglect. Nature was gradually reclaiming this place, with ivy creeping up the walls and wildflowers sprouting from the cracks in the pavement. The weather, overcast and gloomy, added to the sense of foreboding and melancholy. In the quiet solitude, I could almost hear the whispers of the past, the echoes of laughter and cries that once filled these halls. The asylum had a reputation in the town as a place of suffering and sorrow, a place where the most troubled souls were hidden away from the world. The stories of torment and tragedy were etched into its very fabric, its walls holding secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. As I stood there, a sense of anticipation mixed with trepidation washed over me. The place seemed to pulsate with an energy, an undercurrent of unease that was almost palpable. I felt an inexplicable pull towards the asylum, a curiosity to uncover the stories it held within its decaying walls. And yet, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me like a second skin. With a deep breath, I pushed the creaking gates open. The rusty hinges groaned in protest, breaking the silence that hung in the air like a shroud. As I stepped into the asylum, I could feel the weight of its dark past pressing down on me. I knew then that I was stepping into a world that was trapped in time, a world that was waiting to reveal its secrets to those brave enough to venture into its depths. Inside the asylum, the air was heavy with silence and decay. But as I moved deeper into the building, I began to hear faint whispers. At first I dismissed it as the wind whistling through the broken windows, but the hushed murmurs became more distinct, more human. The echoes of laughter and cries danced through the empty halls, each sound a chilling imprint of the asylum's tormented past. The walls, once white and pristine, were now stained with time, their paint peeling off in large chunks. The once polished wooden floors were now rotting, creaking under my weight as I ventured further into the labyrinth of despair. Every corner, every room held a story, a memory of the forgotten souls that once roamed these halls. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices, each one desperate to be heard. It was as if the asylum itself was alive, its pulse beating in time with the eerie whispers. The chilling laughter, the muffled cries, the disjointed words, they all seemed to be carried on the very air I was breathing. A sudden cold breeze swept through the hallway, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I felt a presence, an unseen watcher hidden in the shadows. The feeling of being watched, of being followed, was overwhelming. My heart pounded in my chest, the rhythmic thumping echoing the whispers that filled the air. As I moved forward, the whispers seemed to follow, growing louder with each step. The eerie sounds bounced off the peeling walls, creating a symphony of unease that filled the abandoned asylum. The disembodied voices seemed to be warning me, urging me to leave, to escape from the oppressive dread that hung in the air. The deeper I ventured into the asylum, the stronger the feeling of unease became. It was as if I had stepped into another world, a world haunted by the echoes of the past. The whispers, the laughter, the cries, they were all part of this world, a world forgotten by time but still very much alive. There was an inexplicable dread in the air, a feeling that I was not alone in that forsaken place. The whispers in the halls were not just echoes of the past. They were a reminder that some stories, some places, are better left forgotten. As I ventured further into the asylum, I saw something, a shadowy figure moving in the distance. It was just a silhouette at first, a vague form against the backdrop of the decrepit walls. Yet there was an uncanny sense of familiarity about it, like a forgotten nightmare creeping back into consciousness. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, gliding over the cracked tiles and broken furniture. It was as if it was a part of the asylum itself, a remnant of its dark past. The figure was hazy, almost ethereal, like a wisp of smoke caught in the moonlight, but there was something undeniably human about it, something that made my blood run cold. The air grew colder as the figure drew nearer, and a sense of dread washed over me. The whispers grew louder, the laughter more maniacal, and the cries more desperate. The atmosphere in the asylum shifted, becoming even more oppressive. I could feel the weight of the past, the agony and torment of those who had been confined within these walls, pressing down on me. I tried to move, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. It was as if the figure was drawing me in, pulling me towards it. I was caught in its eerie presence, unable to escape. The fear was paralyzing, a cold hand clutching at my heart. The figure was closer now, close enough for me to make out its shape. It was tall and thin, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to stretch out towards me. Its face was obscured by the shadows, but I could feel its gaze, piercing and cold, fixed on me. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the seconds that ticked away as the figure drew closer. I was trapped, ensnared by my own curiosity and the chilling allure of the unknown. The figure was just a few steps away now, its form becoming clearer with each passing second. I was frozen in fear, unable to tear my gaze away from the approaching figure. In the deafening silence of the asylum, the figure stood before me, a manifestation of the building's dark past. The horror of its presence was palpable, chilling the air around me. It was a stark reminder of the asylum's forgotten souls, trapped in a perpetual state of despair. The figure seemed to morph before my eyes, its shape shifting, becoming more human-like, yet uncannily distorted. A terrifying realization washed over me. This was not a mere shadow, but a spectral echo of a patient, forever trapped within these walls. A primal fear seized me, my heart pounding like a drum, echoing in the hollow halls. I was overcome with a desperate need to flee from this nightmare. With every ounce of courage, I turned and ran, the chilling laughter of the spectre echoing in my ears. I can't explain what I saw in that forsaken place, but it was a nightmare I'll never forget. This is my story, one that haunts me to this day. So there we were, driving down a desolate road, our laughter echoing in the car. It was an ordinary road trip, but we were no ordinary friends. We were thrill-seekers, explorers, adventurers. The world was our playground, and we lived for the unexpected. It was then that we spotted an old, weather-beaten sign pointing off the main road. Haunted House, it read, and with a shared glance, we made our decision. We were going on a detour that would lead us to a notorious haunted house. It was a spontaneous decision, driven by our insatiable curiosity. We yearned for the thrill, the adrenaline rush, the unknown. It was supposed to be just another exciting chapter in our adventure book, another story to tell around campfires. But as we veered off the main road, the atmosphere shifted. Little did we know what awaited us in the Sinister House. The house stood tall, a chilling monument amidst the dying trees. It was a grotesque relic of a bygone era, its once grandeur now replaced with an aura of decay and desolation. Its darkened windows, like hollow, soulless eyes, stared back at us, as if daring us to venture within its forsaken halls. The paint was peeling off its weather-beaten walls, revealing a skeleton of rotting wood. Ivy crawled up its sides, a green, creeping shroud that seemed to strangle the life out of the crumbling structure. The front porch groaned under our weight, each footstep echoing through the silence like a solemn drumbeat, announcing our presence to the unseen spirits that resided within. The air grew colder as we approached the entrance, a stark contrast to the warm summer's day outside. An oppressive silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves, the cawing of a distant crow, or the eerie whispering of the wind. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting for us to cross the threshold into the unknown. The door was heavy, its wood warped and swollen from years of neglect. It creaked loudly as we pushed it open, the sound reverberating through the empty house. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to leave this place of forgotten memories and looming dread. But there was a morbid fascination, a curiosity that propelled us forward into the gloom. Stepping inside, we were greeted by a musky scent of damp, rotting wood and the faint trace of something else, something that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a smell of age, of time standing still, of secrets buried deep within the heart of the house. The grand staircase loomed ahead, its ornate balustrade now covered in a thick layer of dust. The wallpaper was faded and torn, revealing glimpses of the bare wooden walls beneath. We could see the remnants of a once majestic chandelier, now hanging precariously from the ceiling, its crystal pendants catching the faint glimmer of light that filtered in through the grimy windows. A shiver ran down my spine as we pushed the creaking door open. We were now in the belly of the beast, in the heart of the haunted house. Little did we know, the real horror was yet to come. Once inside, the house seemed to come alive with its own terrifying symphony. The air was thick with age and dust, and the silence was so heavy it felt like a tangible presence. But then, the house began to breathe. The floorboards beneath us creaked and groaned as if burdened by the weight of countless untold stories. Every step we took seemed to echo back at us from the shadowy corners of the room, amplifying our growing sense of unease. Then, the whispers began, faint at first, like a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves, but they grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the very walls of the house were trying to speak to us, whispering tales of sorrow and fear that sent shivers down our spines. The house had welcomed us with its silence, but now it was telling us its story in a language of creaks and whispers. Despite our fears, curiosity led us to the basement. The basement was a world of its own, a world where the dolls ruled. A chill ran down our spines as we took in the sight. It was a room filled with dolls, not the kind you'd expect in a child's room, but older, creepier ones, with lifeless eyes that seemed to follow us around. There was an unnerving array of them. Porcelain dolls with cracked faces, rag dolls with frayed edges and faded colors, and wooden dolls with joints that creaked eerily. Each of them, in their own twisted way, radiated an unsettling aura. It was as if we'd stumbled upon a bizarre, long-forgotten collection, a testament to the passage of time and the decay of innocence. As we navigated the sea of silent observers, the air grew denser, almost suffocating. The dim light from our torches cast long, grotesque shadows that danced on the worn-out wallpaper, adding to the eerie atmosphere. We could almost hear the faint whispers of ghostly lullabies, the mournful melodies that once soothed these dolls to sleep. Suddenly, the door behind us slammed shut with a deafening thud. We spun around, hearts pounding, torches scanning the darkness. But there was nothing. No wind, no movement. Just the echo of the slamming door reverberating in the silence. We were trapped. Trapped in a room full of lifeless eyes and silent whispers, in a house that reeked of forgotten tales and spectral presences. The feeling of being watched intensified, the doll's eyes seeming to glow in the dim light. The whispers grew louder, the air colder, and the room smaller. In that moment, we realized the true horror we'd unwittingly stumbled upon. This wasn't a simple detour or an adventurous exploration. We were in the belly of a beast, a haunted house with a sinister past, and we were its prey. There we were, trapped in a haunted house with no way out. The dolls, the room, the house, all of it was a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. It was a world where the dolls ruled, and we were mere trespassers caught in their silent, accusing stares. Our laughter had turned into whispers, our bravado into fear. As we stood there, backs against the door, the room seemed to close in on us. The once mundane dolls now twisted into grotesque figures, their glassy eyes reflecting our terror. But fear has a funny way of sharpening your instincts. We had to escape. With a collective push, we managed to force the door open, the chilling lullabies of the house fading into the night as we stumbled out. The drive back was silent. Our minds were haunted by the memories of the house. The menacing whispers, the chilling creaks, and those dolls. Oh, those dolls. They've become the stuff of our nightmares, their twisted faces forever etched in our minds. And that, my friends, was our sinister road trip. Thank you all for tuning into Haunted Lullabies. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Until next time, sweet nightmares.